Hello and welcome in to another episode of the Fantasy Football Forecast. I'm your host, Trevor Scott, doing another solo episode today to go over some of the week's camp notes, contract disputes, and injuries. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. So the first thing we're going to go over is the contract disputes. I think this is impacting the highest level of players, obviously. And the first one we're going to talk about is Brandon Ayuk. I think this one has been the most annoying to follow for all fans, especially 49er fans. And so where we're at currently is there are two options on the table for Brandon Ayuk to choose from. And so really the ball's in his court now. One of them is to be traded and sign with the Steelers. And the 49ers have already negotiated the trade package that would land the Steelers Brandon Ayuk. And I think in that event, we would have a dedicated episode to how that would impact the Steelers offense, how that would impact the 49ers offense, where all of these players would be ranked moving into drafts this, for the rest of the offseason. But then, there also is a pretty good chance that he goes and figures out a way to sign with the 49ers. I think it's pretty clear that, to me anyways, that he wants to stay. He just wants to try and drive the 49ers price up as high as possible. And the most recent reporting on this from this afternoon was that they are in agreement on the first 3 years, but Ayuk wants a little bit more assurances on that fourth year. So I expect that the fact that he's back at the table, the fact that they're talking about this, I think it is an indicator that he wants to stay with the 49ers, that he's going to try and figure out a way to stay with the 49ers, and that, we'd be able to just continue to evaluate these situations as is. So hopefully this will get sorted out very soon because, right, like a lot of us are drafting in the coming weeks here. So the earlier we know the information on this, the better. And so definitely stay tuned. Definitely pay very close attention to Brandon Ayuk. But my expectation as of right now is that he's going to stay with the 49ers, and all of the analysis that we've been doing with the 49ers and with the Steelers will continue to hold true. The second situation is CeeDee Lamb. And I'm kind of surprised how publicly this has played out. I don't know that I expected it to just continue to stay so public, for Jerry Jones to continue to comment on it so much. But what I think is happening here from Jerry Jones' perspective is he's a champion of the owners. And I can't imagine that he would go and sign a record-setting wide receiver deal right before Brandon Ayuk is about to sign a deal. And Ayuk is already trying to leverage ownership for more money in his contract. And a new record-setting contract would just help his case in terms of pushing up his overall guaranteed money, his guaranteed at signing, and his average annual value on his contract. So I think that CeeDee Lamb's going to get signed within 48 to 72 hours of Ayuk's situation getting settled. I've been telling everybody that will listen to me that. And so, if he does end up signing that quickly after the Ayuk situation gets settled, I'll just think that no matter what. So, hopefully that has some merit to it, right? Hopefully that makes sense to you if you're listening to this. So I wouldn't be worried about CeeDee Lamb. They're going to pay him. He's the best receiver, or one of the best receivers in the league. And the Cowboys offense is nothing without him. Like, they definitely need him to sign. And he's going to be there. So for drafting purposes, I wouldn't move him down because of the contract dispute at all at this time. And then the third one is Jamar Chase. I feel like this one has kind of flown under the radar because these other two have been getting so much publicity, and Chase has since been termed day-to-day and isn't practicing, even though he was earlier in camp. And so, I think the deal could get done pretty quickly, but I also think that this is going to be on the Bengals' terms. I think Chase started looking around and seeing that all these other receivers were going to start getting paid or get extensions, and I know I didn't expect him to get a new deal until 2025, but the fact that they franchise tagged T. Higgins and that they already have taken care of Burrow, it just seems like Chase's time here. So I think that they'll get this done. I, again, am not going to be affecting his draft stock at this point, but this is definitely something that's going to get more light shed on it as these other two situations get set. For the injury updates, we have a lot of them, unfortunately. The big name that got hurt was Jahmyr Gibbs. He injured his hamstring. They said minor hamstring injury, so they said 1 to 2 weeks. But currently is still week to week. He's not practicing. He is expected to be ready for week 1, but as we all know, hamstring injuries can linger. He can be fully back, and then the risk of re-injury is just very high. So, kind of proceed with caution here with Gibbs. He also has a ton of upside, obviously, and he can be one of the most explosive backs. And I've talked about earlier in the offseason the fact that he has number one overall running back upside, especially if Montgomery were ever to get hurt throughout the season, he could just be going off throughout that time. So, I do still really like Jahmyr Gibbs. I do think I'm going to push him down now below Jonathan Taylor, down to running back 8, which is lower than I think pretty much anybody's going to have him. I think he's still going to be in the top 5 of a lot of people's rankings and in the top, in that second tier. But I do think now that I'm going to push Kyren Williams and Jonathan Taylor up ahead of him. So he's going to fall down into that running back 7 position for me there. Then the next guy on the list, Jordan Addison, he had an ankle injury. He got carted off, but then we heard that it wasn't that serious. So I think there was a big frenzy when we got this news, oh no, he's getting carted off. This might be a season-ending injury, but sounds like a minor ankle injury, not even a high ankle sprain. So, he should be back on the field before the season starts, and we do expect him for week 1. But Mark Andrews got in a car accident. I don't know how many people even heard about that or flagged that. He was able to walk away from it and, is still not practicing yet, but I think they expect him to practice in the, very soon. And that's very good to hear. Very, very, very thankful that he's okay, obviously. And, that he's going to be able to start the season with no issues here. But just wanted to note that on Mark Andrews. For Malik Neighbors, he suffered an ankle injury. We consider it minor. I don't think that's the biggest problem he's going to be dealing with. He has Daniel Jones as his quarterback. And if you're watching this, you probably already know that he was 2 for 6 for 13 yards and 2 picks. He threw a pick 6. He threw a pick trying to throw the ball deep down the sidelines. So I still am going to hold strong on Neighbors. I have him at wide receiver 30. People have been pushing him all the way up into the top 15 wide receivers. It's just not something I'm going to be doing as long as Daniel Jones is his quarterback. But the ankle should be fine. Marquise Brown. This one is a little bit more serious of an injury. He suffered a sternoclavicular injury, which is up in the collarbone area, and he's going to miss 4 to 6 weeks. So that's a lot of preparation time, and he's going to miss the beginning of the year. So his draft position, I expect to start to plummet, and I would expect to see Xavier Worthy start to fly up draft boards a little bit, and, maybe that's 10 spots, maybe that's 12 spots, but he's going to get a lot more reps in practice. He's going to be the number 2 to start the year. So I think he's going to be on the field more than he maybe was going to at, before this injury. But when Marquise Brown falls here now, if he gets down into the 8th, 9th, even 10th round, possibly into the, 100 range, I could see him being a very good value there, especially if you have IR spots. Another one where you need to know your league settings, right? If you have 3 or 4 IR spots and you have Marquise Brown sitting there in the 9th round, he's somebody that could definitely help you over the second half of the season, especially if he steps back into his second half role. This injury shouldn't affect him long term. It's not like Gibbs where you have to worry about re-injury. This is something where he got landed on in a preseason game and it got his collarbone. I think once he's healed, he's going to be full go. No real risk for re-injury. And so I still like Marquise Brown a lot. I still think he's very much worth the draft pick in that 9th round range. JJ McCarthy out for the season with a meniscus tear. He got the full rebuild of the meniscus, and unfortunately that means he's going to be out for the season. Sam Darnold was the number 1 quarterback on the depth chart, but I think a lot of us considered that McCarthy was going to take over at some point this year. But now I think Darnold is a decent quarterback target in 2 QB leagues. He could, in this offense, easily exceed anything he's ever done in his career. We saw what Nick Mullins did in this offense. He was an extremely effective quarterback in relief of Kirk Cousins after his Achilles injury last year. And so with McCarthy out of the way, I do think that Sam Darnold is going to be up in that group of quarterbacks that are going to keep their job the whole year now, right? I think he's much more in that class with Derek Carr and with Will Levis than he is necessarily with Russell Wilson or Jacoby Brissett. Rashid Shaheed came out with a foot or toe injury. He's not practicing currently. This is still a very new injury. This would be very unfortunate for the Saints. I think that he's got deep speed. He can score on any given play, and that they're going to have to lean even heavier on Olave, and they're going to have to find somebody to kind of take this third role in the offense. So maybe that goes to Taysom Hill a little bit more, in the passing game, or maybe they have Juwan Johnson No, I mean, he's hurt, so that's not going to work either. So I'm really not sure what the Saints are planning to do at this spot. So they really have to hope that Shaheed can get back on the field soon. Well, I'm sure we'll get updates on this injury over the next couple days. Matthew Stafford had a hamstring injury, very minor. He's going to be ready for week 1. This is nothing to see here. Just wanted to note that so you're not in your drafts saying, oh, wait, why does he have an injury designation next to him when you're getting ready to click draft? He's going to be ready to go, and he's totally fine. Marshawn Lloyd, he also has a hamstring injury. This is minor, but he's not practicing. He still should be ready for week 1. The Packers still really do like him. So, the idea is that he's going to carve out some sort of role for this offense, but that's not going to start until he's able to get caught up in practice and get fully healthy. So I think, even more confidence into Josh Jacobs to start the year. And then lastly here, let's go over some Camp Buzz preseason news. Just some updates on things from a couple of the games that I thought were particularly noteworthy, things that affect players that are going late in the draft. I don't think that that's necessarily super worth going over. But the first two here, Tank Dell and Christian Kirk, were off the field in two wide receiver sets. So I think that's noteworthy, right? Tank obviously scored the touchdown still. He still has quite a bit of upside, but I think his snap share is going to get capped at 75 or 80%. Again, he's going late enough where I think it's fine, but just something to note that if you're expecting him to be on the field more, I don't know that that's going to be the case. And Christian Kirk, I think, was the surprise that he seemed like he was going to be the number 1 wide receiver, but then you have Gabe Davis and Brian Thomas Jr., both of the new acquisitions, playing on the 2 wide receiver sets on the outside. So I think that limits Kirk's upside. I have him at wide receiver 34, and I'm starting to hesitate even more because I'm not even sure I like him over Brian Thomas Jr., who we're going to get into here in a second. So I guess I'll jump down to the third bullet and come back to Marvin Harrison Jr., but Brian Thomas Jr. has been getting all kinds of hype in camp right now. They're saying his game speed is noticeable. He's very fast. He's been unguardable in practice. Trevor Lawrence loves him all levels of the field, and so it's getting harder and harder to justify having Brian Thomas Jr.'s draft stock be so low. If you're looking for a high upside wide receiver in round 10, 9, 10, somewhere in there, that's not too early to start thinking about Brian Thomas Jr., even though he's going to be buried in whatever rankings that you're looking at for the, for your leagues during your draft. So make sure you queue him, make sure you know where he is on your draft boards, and make an effort to get him with one of your later round picks. Going back to Marvin Harrison Jr., he's been turning heads at joint practice. This isn't any sort of surprise. I mean, he can get open at will. He was the number 1 receiver in this class and for over a long period of time coming in. So it is good to get confirmation bias and hear that he is actually having a strong camp, that he is doing well in joint practices. So gives additional confidence to the draft overall for him, for his draft position. He's going extremely early. He's being drafted very aggressively. So it's very good to hear that he's turning heads. He's going to be the number 1 target in this offense. Something that surprised me out of Bills camp, James Cook has been struggling with fumbling and pass protection. And so I'm not sure that that's going to affect him from a fantasy perspective. I think he is going to be on the field. He's the best pass catcher in the backfield. And maybe he missed a couple assignments during camp, but Ray Davis has been notably better than him in pass protection per the coaches and the beat reporters. So that gives me a little bit of pause because I do think that this offense is going to be throwing quite a bit. I mean, they have Josh Allen, so it's good. The offense is going to run through him. So if in obvious passing down situations or in deep passing situations, they have Ray Davis on the field instead of James Cook, he's not going to be getting any of those easy check down looks in those situations. So, maybe it's one of those things where he loses 10 to 15% snap share and it's doesn't look like that big of a deal, but it caps his upside just a little bit from week to week. So I still love James Cook. I just figured I needed to put this out there because that is something that was coming out of Bills camp that seemed noteworthy to me. Another thing we heard this weekend is that Keenan Allen is up to 230 pounds. That seemed shocking because he played at 210 or 212 on the Chargers last season. So he's either put on a ton of muscle or that number's not quite right, or I'm not sure. So I don't think he's going to be bad. I do think he's going to play in the slot. We didn't get 3 wide receiver sets two and three wide receiver sets with the starting unit for the Bears. So unfortunately, I don't have that information at this time. But I do expect Keenan to still be productive. He's going so late in drafts too because of how crowded the Bears offense is. But Caleb Williams continues to look great. And so with good quarterback play, I still think Keenan Allen can be a startable receiver in 3 wide receiver leagues. Rashee Rice doesn't appear to be facing suspension. I think this is extremely notable news because, especially with Hollywood Brown's injury, coupled with the fact that we now expect him to start and play the entire season, Rice is still not being adjusted in the rankings on these sites very much, and he should be. He should be getting pushed into the top 25 receivers pretty easily, I think. Here, there was no other pass catchers in the wide receiver room end of last year, but I've stressed it so many times in the weekly rankings. He was constantly in the top 10. He was very productive over the last 6 games last year and during the playoffs. So I do expect that he continues to get pushed up. Another guy that you want to make sure you queue as you get outside the first 6 rounds, because making sure you know where you can get him and where you feel comfortable taking him is going to be very important. I think he's going to give you a major edge later in your drafts if you're able to get him. JSN is looking great in Seattle camp. He could move into the 2 wide receiver sets. Tyler Lockett's dealing with a mysterious leg issue or injury. They haven't said much about it, so I don't think it's major or even that noteworthy, but JSN could be getting into a position where he's going to be playing during 2 wide receiver sets, and that's really all he needs to be much more productive. They have a new offensive coordinator, new system, and obviously he's going into his 2nd year, so he could take a major step forward if he is playing a significantly higher snap share than he did last year. So, and again, he's another guy that's going really late. He's going 10, 11, 12th round, depending on, your leagues and who likes, if anybody really likes him. So, again, another guy in round 10, round 11, you still need wide receivers. You took a couple running backs through the mid rounds. He's somebody that I would strongly consider and somebody that I could see turning into a viable flex player for your teams come week 4 or week 5, something like that. And then the last note here, I put this last because I expect that most of you have heard this by now, because this news came out kind of close to the last time we did this Camp Notes episode, and that's Rico Dowdle was listed as was noted to be the running back 1 in Dallas. So Zeke came out as the running back 1 on the first official depth chart, but the beat reporters and the coaches were raving about Rico Dowdle. He was taking a lot of snaps with the first team offense. And so my opinion on this is that I would take Rico Dowdle. The fact that Zeke is there, the fact that Zeke is taking or is listed as number 1 on the depth chart, on the unofficial depth chart, is going to keep Rico Dowdle's ADP low. But if I'm going to take either one of these guys straight up, I'm going to take a chance on Rico Dowdle, and just Zeke I think is mostly cooked. So Rico Dowdle is the guy I want in Dallas, and I think he's an excellent target at running back in the last couple rounds of your draft, because he still goes in round 13 or round 14 of drafts. So, making sure somebody where he is in the rankings, because if you're drafting, you only see the top 10, 12, 15 names, and he could be well below that, but just make sure that you have an eye on him. You make sure you take a peek at him if you do think he's better than the top listed players in the rankings of whatever site that you're drafting on. And with that, I hope you got some good information from this, and we look forward to talking to you in the next one.